All right, so good morning. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really glad and honored that you, well, I want to say I'm really glad and honored that you chose my talk, but honestly, who's here just because this is the only developer talk? Yeah, all right. So for those of you that are like, man, this title sucks, I'm not going to learn anything, right? You're just like, I'm just going to come here, whatever. Maybe I'll end up in the hallway later. So I do appreciate you coming. Hopefully, even for those of you that this topic is appealing, I hope I have just something for you that is useful. And I find that generally does happen. Even if I go to a talk that I feel like I know a lot about that topic, there's always just that little nugget that you may or you might get. And sometimes it could be that nugget that you've just been waiting for. So one of the things I want to start with first is I kind of want to touch on this thing called the journey of a WordPress developer. And it's kind of fitting. I actually didn't know they were going to the imposter syndrome talk, but it's kind of fitting because what I want to really cover is kind of talk about some different stages that you may be at before we get into the talk. And I hope that it'll help you gauge maybe where you're at and so forth. So the first one, I almost took this slide out because I was afraid that some people might see that I put WordPress assembler and think that's a derogatory statement, but it's not. Really the point is that we've all been there, right? At some point we started at this spot. You may still be at this spot, that's fine. But really, what is an assembler? This is someone who finally realizes that WordPress is this amazing thing that can do really cool stuff and they see the value that it has. They also know how to host it, do the self-hosting and look at all the different hosting options. They know how to use plugins and they can configure these plugins and make WordPress do really, really cool stuff. And that's actually a great thing. But that's usually like where you start off. But then it's not too long that you have to become the master of search, right? And actually, you never actually end up not becoming the master of search, right? Even when you're a really good developer, search is your friend. But at this phase, you finally get to this point where WordPress just isn't quite doing what you want it to do. There may or may not be some plugins out there, but maybe what you need is just a small change. And so you go to search, you find this code snippet, and it says, hey, put this in your functions.php, right? So you do, you elegantly, as I like to put here, you elegantly add a few lines of code to your functions.php and magic. Right? You don't know why it's working, but it's amazing. So, what I want to do today...
That's my cousin.
I love it. I've been, even at work, the last few days since I found this and put this slide in here, anybody's like, yeah, I can't figure out how to get this to work. I'm like, have you tried magic? It's a good slide. But what I want to do today is try and break down that magic, like what's really happening. And that's where WordPress hooks comes in. And as much as I like to dilly-dally here and keep dragging you along, there's still one more thing we have to talk about before we talk about hooks. And that's really how WordPress works. So the first thing you need to realize is that WordPress is an event-driven piece of software. And this quote right here, it says, event-driven programming works off the premise that something has happened. Hence the name for actions in the WordPress lingo. And so what it's talking about there is that one of the hooks that WordPress has that we're going to learn about today is called an action hook. And it is really fitting that that's the name for it, because it implies that you're trying to make WordPress take some type of action. All right, so that's the first thing to know. WordPress is event-driven. And this link right here, if you click on it, I'm going to share the slide link later, but you can see it at the top. It's at Develop with WP. But if you go to this link down here, it takes you to Tuts Plus, which has a really good article that talks about this event-driven framework. This right here came from rarst.net. Has anybody ever been to Rarst's website? Okay. I want to give credit. This is his image, and when I was researching for this, I found this image everywhere. But it's just another good example of how WordPress is event-driven. This is the typical life cycle of a typical page. And so as you can see here, WordPress is executing different stuff at different points in time as it creates and loads that page. And that's what allows us to use hooks to hook into WordPress and have it do stuff that we want it to do at a specific point in time. So that's kind of part of the underlying magic of how this is working. The fact that WordPress is executing certain things at certain times in a certain order, and we know about these, and we can target them and make WordPress do Cool stuff.
How do you spell that?
Rarst. RARST.net, I think.
That image is on the docs page for actions now.
Okay.
If you go look at it.
On the codex? Okay.
So I don't know who added it, but it was just
Okay.
last
Yeah,
night,
it's
right?
a great, this is a great visual, representation of what's happening. All right, so we know that WordPress is event-driven. We have these hooks, but what kind of hooks do we have? Well, it turns out there's two types of hooks, and we're going to cover them just briefly. The first one is called an action hook, and these are just my definitions, but it allows a developer to execute new functionality at a specific point in time. So what we're trying to say here is that we're trying to get WordPress to do something different, something that it wasn't originally going to do. All right, so that's what an action hook does at a high level. The filter hook, so it's pretty similar, except that we're trying to change or manipulate some type of data at a point before which WordPress is going to execute it. So the difference here is that WordPress was actually already going to do something, but we're trying to tell it to do it a little bit differently than it was originally going to. And so I always like to say an action is trying to do something new and a filter is trying to do something differently. So this is really cool, right? We've kind of got an idea of how this is working, but how do we actually do this from a programmatic perspective? So right here I've got what I call the anatomy of a WordPress hook, and it's just a really simple layout of how you would do this. You would create a function, and then in there you would do something really cool, like really. And then you do your add action or add filter depending on what type of hook you're trying to do. And that's pretty basic. The magic really is at the add action part. So I want to kind of break down this part of this piece of code. And so what's happening here with this add action or add filter, they're very similar, is that you have 4 parameters, 2 of which are required. And generally speaking, when you're doing this, most of the time you can get away with just the first 2 parameters. So the first parameter that we have there where it says hook name, what that's referring to is that's referring to a specific WordPress hook or hook that you're trying to target. So you looked at WordPress, you found that, hey, this is the spot where I want to do something. WordPress has given me a hook. It's in court, so and you'll see this in a little bit. I'll show you like the actual hooks within the code. But we picked a specific hook. The next thing is the function to be named, which is just a cool way of saying your function. And then the third parameter is a priority. So this is probably, of the 2 optional parameters, this is the one you might use if you ever use it. And so what's happening here is that you could have a whole lot of different stuff hooking in at the same hook for WordPress. And you may need something to execute prior to other commands or other pieces of code. So this priority number, 1 being executed first and all the way down, the bigger the number gets, the later in the cycle that it gets deployed. But this allows you to control when certain things actually get executed using the same hook. And then the last one is accepted args. I honestly never used this one. Has anybody ever used accepted args? Okay. I don't think that's that useful most of the time, but essentially you're able to tell it the number of args or arguments that your function should be accepting or could be accepting. And I've also linked down here. You can click on that and I'll take you to the codex where it talks about the add filter and add action hooks, and you can see it in the codex. All right, so let's see this like really actually doing something. So right here we're removing a dashboard widget. So a dashboard widget, when you log into the dashboard, this is just like the news feed that you see, or if you're using a plugin, say for example Gravity Forms, it puts a widgetized area up there that says you've had this many forms that have been submitted recently, that kind of stuff. So what I'm doing here is I'm just telling WordPress that, well, those are really cool, I don't want them, so let's just get rid of them. And there actually is a function called remove meta box. We pass in our parameters that it requires to target a specific meta box. And then we use an add action. And the action we're going to use is called WP dashboard setup. So if you were to look up that, you can find more information about it in the codex. But essentially it's when WordPress is setting up the dashboard, as the name suggests, which is a really good thing about WordPress, I think. They try to name things that semantically make some sense. So we're just saying, hey WordPress, when you're setting up that dashboard, let's just remove that meta box, and then when it outputs the dashboard, it'll be gone. All right, so a real simple example. And as you can see, the function to be named is just my function, and I'm targeting a specific hook. So here's another simple example. This time we're doing a filter. So one of the things I want you to notice is that, like I said in the beginning with the definitions, that generally when you're using a filter, you're trying to manipulate some type of data. So what happens is, most of the time, is you're going to be passing in a function. So for example, or an argument. So I've been passing in this errors variable, which gives me access to it within my function. And all I'm doing this could just be one line, but I really wanted to spell it out so that everybody could see. But I'm taking in that variable, I'm changing it to be something different than it originally was, and then I'm returning it back to WordPress altered the way I want it to be. And then I'm again using another hook. This one's called login errors. So anytime WordPress goes to execute a login error, it'll see this code, it'll run it, it'll change that variable, and it'll put it back out to WordPress altered. And now I've changed what the error logs look like when you log into your WordPress site. So hopefully, if you're new to this, you've by now realized that this is really neat, but how do I find the right hook? And I don't have a really great answer, but I have a couple of options for you. I think it is one of the more difficult parts of the process, and what makes it really difficult too is that you can actually find multiple hooks that'll work for you, but they may not exactly be the right hook. But there are a couple of options. The simplest option is the codex. So everybody says the codex is your friend, which I agree. If you're new to development, you probably think that's ludicrous because every time you go there, it doesn't make any sense to you. But if you're in that phase, the codex will make more sense, and the codex is your friend. So at the plugins API, they have these two pages: action references and filter references. And if I go to one of these, what you'll see is that down here it actually lists them. So these are hooks that are found within the admin action hooks, and then post and page hooks. And so you can go in here and find a lot of hooks, and this is a very useful document. But wait, there's actually more. There's a way that I like to find the hooks, and that's by looking in the code itself within core. Who here looks in the code? Okay, it's pretty awesome, right? I think so. So the best way I think to find a hook is to look in the code. And so what I mean by that is think about what you're trying to do, and then go back to search, search is your friend, and find out which files are executing that process within WordPress. Then go look at them in core. And even if you don't understand everything or everything that's happening, they get these really cool comments that say, hey, this filter is the title placeholder text. So you don't have to know code, just read that comment section and know that that's what this function or this hook is doing. So here's what we're doing on this example. This is on the edit form advanced. So this is the form that's responsible for setting up the post edit screen. So when you go to create a new post, like you have your title, your editor, all that stuff, all those meta boxes, it works with setting that all up. And if we scroll down through there, we'll find this placeholder title or title placeholder variable. And you'll see it's wrapped in the value of it is wrapped in an apply filters. And so the way this works is this is saying, hey, make a action filter here. So this is going to allow you to use the action filter hook because it's apply filters. This is how a hook is created. The first argument there is the hook's name. So if you were to target this with your add filter, you would put inner title here, and we'll see this in a second. The next parameter is the actual value of it, and then the third parameter is any arguments that can be passed in. So what arguments can you pass into it? And so here's an example of us using it. As you can see, I have add filter, I have inner title here at the bottom, and I have my function. And all I'm really doing is I'm taking in that title placeholder and I'm just changing it. So here I changed the title go, and I returned it. So you can make it say whatever you want. I have some conditional stuff set here too, so that this only happens on a specific post type, because that's generally what you'll want to do. You're not going to want to change this on every post, just certain ones. So taking this a step further, there's another example. So here's a do action. So this is how an action hook is created. If we scroll down pretty much just a few more lines in that same file, we'll find this one that says fires after the title field. And so what this is going to allow you to do is hook into WordPress right after the title field has been built in that post edit screen and do something. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm using that edit form after title hook. And what I'm creating is a pseudo meta box. which may not seem too practical. But the reason I'm doing this is just because, and if you know a way, let me know, but I have not found a way to create a meta box in between like the default editor and the title because the editor's fixed in its place. So there's really no way, you can't just do like an add meta box and use this hook, or you can't do anything. So, but you can create a fake one and make it act just like one, except it won't be draggable. Side note. But that's what I'm doing here. And again, I'm just using some conditional stuff to say, hey, only do this. This is only for like this particular post type. And this is just what it looks like. So I've created this meta box down here. It looks a lot better on my computer, I gotta say. It does not look good. All right, but wait, there's even more. So this is an introductory talk, but I just felt like it really brings it full circle, this topic of hooks and how to understand hooks when you understand how to make your own hooks. And so the next part of this talk, we're going to cover, hooks are awesome. WordPress gives us a lot of hooks, but what if we want our own hooks? So that's what we're going to cover next. And I think this next slide is going to be horrendously not look good. Yeah, there's a lot of code, don't worry. But I just want to show, essentially I'm creating a custom post type. And right here I've zoomed into the top portion, just the label section. And you can see that on this post type I have it set up to use a singular and plural value to populate all the labels. And what I've also done is I've taken and I've wrapped those variables within a filter. So I've created my own filter, applied filters, I gave it a unique name, and I gave it a value. So in this example, my singular value or variable equals books, and my plural one equals or book, my plural equals books. Pretty simple, right? What that's going to allow me to do, again, I don't know why you would do this, but just work with me on these examples. But what this will allow you to do, or anybody, is change and alter that. So that's what I've done here. So I've created a custom function, I've passed in the plural variable, and I've changed it from books with an S to books with a Z, because that's cool. And so now within the dashboard, it'll look like books with a Z. And you can see in my add filter, I've targeted that specific custom filter and whatnot. So this is the same bit of code. This is just the bottom part. Here I've wrapped the entire args variable, which defines all the different attributes that this custom post type will have. I've wrapped it all in a filter. And again, this is going to allow me to target pretty much any argument for this custom post type. So right here I've passed in the args and I've targeted the menu icon. So the menu icon, when you're creating a post type, by default it's going to put the little pin thing that a normal post has. But WordPress has these things called dash icons that are built into it that you can use custom icons. So I've told it right here, take that menu icon, make it equal to this dash icons books alt, and now I'll have a little book icon next to my post type in the dashboard. If you see right here before, if you look down, I have menu icon as this businessman, and obviously that doesn't make a lot of sense for a book post type, but the book one does. So this is just an example of using hooks within your own code. And really the reason you would do this is that it makes your code extendable. So if you're creating a plugin, and if your plugin is at all popular, doing this will allow other developers to create add-ons and stuff like that, or even for you to create additional add-ons for your plugin. So it just makes your plugin more extendable. So what about themes? Well, themes can actually use hooks too. And believe it or not, you're probably already using some. I mean, who uses WP heading, right? Everybody. It's in every theme. And WP footer. So up here at the top, I just have a snippet from a standard theme. I want to say this is 2015. And you can see I'm calling WP head. And then down here, I just went into the code and found where these functions are called. This file is like general something within the includes. It's a really cool file though. It has like a lot of those functions are in there. But if we look, WP head is simply just a wrapper function around a do action called WP head. So all WordPress did was create a hook there. And the way I see it, if it's good enough for core, it's good enough for me. So here's an example. I don't know, corny jokes. This is what happens when you create your things late at night. So right here I've just created a bunch of random functions and just exactly what WordPress did. You don't have to do this. You could just put these hooks right into your theme template files. But I just wanted to copy what WordPress was doing. So I wrapped all these hooks, action hooks, within their own functions. And now you can just drop my theme header function within your template files and you're off and running. But you're probably, if you've done any type of theme development, you're probably wondering, why would you do this? Because and it's a valid point. So by creating these hooks, it's going to allow people to hook into your theme and insert code at certain points in times. But you as a theme developer don't really need this because we have get template part, which does a lot of that for us. So WordPress already has a function that we're allowed to create modular code and put it into there. But it would allow plugin developers to hook into your code. The problem there too is that I'm just Joe Schmo creating a theme. No one's going to make a custom plugin just to work with my theme, right? But if you do have a popular theme, this would be a way to go. But also, if you have a base theme that you're always building off of, it wouldn't hurt to have these hooks built into your theme that allows you to quickly extend your theme as well. But there would actually be something better, and that's if they were in core. And it turns out there's actually a core ticket for this, and I love this statement. It says, it takes 7 years for these kinds of tickets to brew. We still have about 5 years to go. So it's sad but funny, but it does take a long time for this kind of stuff to get into core. And it's actually a pretty interesting ticket. They argue about the semantics of the naming and whether or not do we really need a before header hook and that kind of stuff. So it's good to see. But it would be really nice if they were in core, because then we would have more standardized hooks that all plugin developers could use to interact with themes at different points in times. I'm sure if you're thinking about it, you could think of a couple of ideas for a before or after nav or before or after header, particularly for ads. And then lastly, so this highlights how hard it is to find a hook. This is the growth of hooks over time by each release. And so currently at 4.1, this chart has us at 1,702 hooks. So there's a lot of hooks. So if you feel daunted and you struggle to find the correct hook, or it just seems like you're in a sea of hooks, you are. So that's why. So that's all I got. Thank you. My name is Bobby. I'm a project manager. I work at 10up, and I love WordPress. Thank you. And I don't know how long that took.
You started 5 minutes early.
Okay. Does anybody? Yes.
I have sort of a general question about hooks. Let's say that you have, you've gone crazy, you have a ton of filters and actions in your functions file, and you've just added a lot of sort of complexity to your situation. How does that affect, I guess the first question is, when do filters and actions trigger? How do they work into the flow of, when are they acted upon? I'm not sure how to phrase that properly. And as a corollary, does that affect performance at all and speed? If, let's say you have way too many filters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, performance-wise is a good question.
Affect things?
Yeah, performance-wise is a good question, and I don't know that I have an answer for that. I've never went crazy with hooks, but the way it's going to work though is that it's going to execute those hooks when it comes to it, whenever it's executing that part of the code. So that's how it's going to happen. Yeah, that's a tough question to answer, to be honest with you. And it's a good question.
The way I've always looked at functions.php is things in there should be site specific. If you think that you're going to write a piece of code that you're going to want to reference in the future, it's probably worth your time to write it as a plugin.
Mm-hmm.
It's also more organized, so you don't open the functions.php up and it's like 2,000 lines long.
And I was also going to say too, I mean, you could even argue as well that if you're going to create all those hooks for, say, a theme, it wouldn't hurt to maybe have like a hooks.php or some type of file and just reference that in your functions.php, just to make it clean. It would also allow people who would want to extend your theme to easily find those hooks, because if they have to wade through functions.php and they're just and you didn't even group them together, I mean, they're pretty much useless at that point, other than for you. Which is, as a side note, with theme frameworks, people argue about what's a good framework or what's not a good framework, and those debates are valid. But what I think is, what makes a framework successful and good for you is because you know it really well. Like, you know all the hooks, you know it inside and out, and that's what makes it good for you.
How often does WordPress core depreciate the hooks ever within
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and if you look at that ticket, that's one of the things they're debating. Like, they don't want to put too many because it's hard to take them out after the fact, right? So that's why, and if you ever get involved with the core stuff, that's what you'll always see, is that they're very sensitive to what's going to get added, just for the fact that if they ever did need to take it out, it would be a long process.
Isn't there a good plugin that like shows, I think I read about this, like I was trying to look it up just now, but I couldn't, that shows the hooks and when they fire.
There was one for Genesis,
Yeah.
Genesis framework specifically.
Yeah. And I don't know much about Genesis. I just call it a hopped up hook machine, so if it does have something like that, that would make sense. Anything else? Does anybody, by the way, I am an imposter because I'm a project manager and I call myself a project manager, so. All right, well, that's all I got. You know, if you have any other questions you want to come up to me afterwards, please feel free. Thank you.
Thanks.